Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Steven Melendez, and I'm going to be bringing you the latest and greatest in soccer news from around the world. Welcome back, everyone, to your favorite soccer podcast. I am happy to be here with you guys again. We finally have the group stages ending of our European competitions. We also have seen some dud week of a domestic weekend that we just had. It was pretty dull, I'm not gonna lie. But we're gonna be getting into all of that today. So let's just talk about what's going to be discussed in today's show. With the first part of the show, we're gonna be talking about the Champions League Wednesday matchups. And then, of course, I'm going to be talking about the draw for the knockout rounds coming up, seeing which teams are in Pot 1, Pot 2, and, what interesting matchups we can get in the knockout rounds. In the second part of the show, we're going to be talking about the Manchester Derby dud, as well as all of the Premier League matchups that happened this past weekend, which, honestly, in my opinion, were all pretty duds. But, we're going to be getting into all of them and seeing, exactly what happened this week. In the third part of the show, we're going to be talking about the Europa League. Same thing with those group stage. With that group stage coming to an end, we're going to be talking about all the matchups that occurred, which teams got into that final, into the round of 32, and which teams, failed to make it there. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about which teams are the favorites to come out on top and punch their ticket into the Champions League for next season. And last, I'm going to be skipping the FIFA World Rankings top 10 this week, and I'm going to be talking about just the top 10 teams remaining in the Champions League. If you guys have been listening a couple of weeks back, actually it's probably like a month or two back, that I did an episode where I said which teams I believed had the best chance of winning the Champions League. So I'm going to be reviewing, which teams I talked about, and then giving my a refreshed top 10 after what happened in the group stage of which teams I believe are going to be making it, or at least which are the top 10 teams in the Champions League so far. So let's get right into today's show with the Champions League Wednesday matchups, starting with PSG versus Istanbul Basaksehir here. And as you guys should all know, if you're unless you've been living under a rock, this game got canceled, or I guess delayed, because of some racial slurs that were uttered by one of the officials on Tuesday, and the players didn't want to keep playing, so they walked off. I believe it was like 12 minutes into the game, so they canceled the game, at least for Tuesday, and they postponed it for Wednesday, and they played it from the time that they let it off. And they continued to play. And at first, honestly, going into this game, I was no longer, I guess I would say, nervous, because obviously we know Manchester United failed to draw against RB Leipzig and give themselves a chance to get into the knockout rounds. And for PSG, now it all came down to, can they make it? Can they lead the group? Or will they, have a draw or lose to Istanbul and be second runners-up and be in pot 2, which honestly, it still matters, because if you're in pot 2, you're most likely going up against one of the top teams in the competition in the round of 16 of the knockout rounds. And honestly, as a PSG fan, I would not want that to happen because I want to make it far. Like, I understand, you need to be challenged because eventually it's going to happen. But in my opinion, I just wanted us to, get a little, maybe not an easy matchup, but not a Bayern, a Liverpool, a Man City. Give me possibly an Atalanta. I'll take a Borussia Mönchengladbach. Who knows? But we'll get into what teams are in which pot later on in this segment. But for now, let's just talk about this game. And PSG absolutely dominated this one. They had nearly 70% possession. They had twice as many shots. They had 9 shots on target. And I'll tell you what, this was the game where you saw Neymar and Mbappe absolutely dominate the competition. I understand it's Istanbul. They're the Turkey team, the Turkish team. They're the worst in this group, and they haven't been playing that well. I usually I give a little bit of credit to those lower teams, even though they're losing. I didn't really feel like Istanbul had any sort of momentum in any game. I know they defeated Manchester United once, and that's where they got their only points of this competition, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they have 5 losses aside from that. -11 goal differential. Not the worst, but pretty close to that. So, they just never seem to have any sort of momentum in this group. They were obviously out from a chance in the Europa League for a while because they were put in a group with RB Leipzig and Manchester United and, of course, PSG. So it was the hopes for them were slight even when this competition started. And obviously this was kind of like that nail in the coffin, or just for them to know that this Champions League competition is just a little bit too far away from them. But they're obviously still a really good team, but they just couldn't put it together. But you get a hat trick from Neymar, you get 2 goals from Mbappe, his first 2 of the Champions League campaign. Incredible to even say that, but it's because he actually just he became the youngest player to reach 20 Champions League goals ever in the history, passing Lionel Messi by, I believe, about a year, if I'm not mistaken. I remember seeing that on Bleacher Report, but it was a big time game. The PSG kind of like solidifying themselves as a top team, which when you go up against these teams like Istanbul, you need to dominate, and they did just that. And I was extremely happy to see it because I'm confident, man. After those few early games where we lost to Manchester United, we lost to RB Leipzig, it didn't look good. I was, to say the least, I was a little scared. I wasn't sure if we had it, if that final appearance was a fluke. But after winning the last 3 games of the competition, all against RB Leipzig, we beat Man United. And of course, obviously now Istanbul. I feel good against any team that we go up against in the knockout rounds because we got Neymar, Mbappe, and now there's talks about them possibly wanting to re-sign with us. And obviously it helps with this whole pandemic because a lot of teams have lost financially, but I don't care. I'll take it. I'll take a win wherever we can take it, and PSG are winning big time lately. Next game, we have Atalanta versus Ajax, with Atalanta getting the win 1-0. I saw it happening this way. I thought there was actually going to be more goals. Of course, you got Atalanta, Ajax, 2 of the best offensive teams in this competition so far, and Atalanta ended up coming out on top. It was just I was leaning towards Atalanta before when I was previewing this game because I just felt like they had more. At least they've been to the this group specifically, because they pretty much came back with the exact same group from last season, has experienced the losses, they've gone through the knockout round, so they've gained a lot more experience, and they brought out all the big guns. They had Zapata, they had Gosens. Surprisingly, they didn't have Papu Gomez in this game, or Ilicic, which is extremely surprising considering that this was, if they lost this game, or I believe, it had to be a loss, that they would have been out of the Champions League. They would have dropped down to the Europa League, and that would have really hurt. And while Ajax, they brought out all their best players. They had Tadic out there, Klaassen, they had Tagliafico, Onana. They had a lot of really good players out there, but in the end, Atalanta came out on top, and really it just goes to show that they have more like a better team. Freuler and Darung in the midfield certainly helped. Christian Romero in the back line is obviously, extremely good. But it was Luis Muriel, totally butchered his name, but it was Luis Muriel, the Colombian striker off the bench, who scored for Atalanta, as he's done ever since he's come to this squad. Like, he's honestly the best bench player in the entire world. I don't care what anybody says. I understand that's a big time thing to say, but after he scored almost 20 goals last season primarily off the bench, he just continues to show that it doesn't matter when you put him in, he's going to impact the game, offensively, night in and night out. He just did it again for Atalanta and sends them into the knockout rounds. Huge game for him, and big time win for Atalanta for them to go into the knockout rounds. Next, we have Bayern Munich versus Locomotive Moscow, and Bayern Munich casually win this game 2-0 to have 5 wins in 6 games in the group stage. And like I was expecting before this group even started, Bayern Munich were going to absolutely dominate. Honestly, I could have easily seen 6 wins in 6 matches, but they got a draw against Atletico, who have been one of the better teams in this entire year, even though they kind of didn't show it too much in the Champions League. They did go through, of course, onto the knockout rounds, which we'll get into their game later. But Bayern Munich just dominated this game, and they won 2-0. They got a goal from Sule and another one from Choupo-Moting, which it always hurts me to see. I mean, I love Choupo-Moting, so it hurts me because I feel like PSG could have kept him. He's such a great striker. He works so hard for his teams, and he's doing the same for Bayern Munich. In this game, of course, they weren't going to play all of their top players because they had to worry about saving guys like Lewandowski. I don't even think they didn't even put Kimmich in. Alphonso Davies got some looks because he hasn't been playing that much all season. I believe he's been dealing with some injury issues. But regardless, Bayern Munich take care of business. They lead the group. Locomotive Moscow had a chance if they would have gotten a draw here or a win. I believe they needed to get that they would have been able to get into the Europa League. But yeah, Bayern Munich weren't going to let any team just go with ease. And of course, they're they haven't lost a game, or they haven't lost a game in the Champions League in a long time, because even though their winning streak ended at 15, I believe, which is just ridiculous, in the Champions League no less, they do continue to just not lose, because they've at least drawn or won a game in at least, I don't want to say a number because I don't know the exact number. Maybe they'll show it here, but I don't think they will. Yeah, no, I don't think they have. No, they won't give me that crazy stat, but I'm sure it is very high. But yeah, Bayern Munich win, get 3 points, move on to the knockout rounds. Next, we have Real Madrid versus Mönchengladbach, who honestly, it wasn't guaranteed that they were going to make it into the knockout rounds. They needed to take care of business here, and they did just that. They're really dominating Borussia Mönchengladbach, who have been throughout most of this group stage, or pretty much throughout the entire group stage. Mönchengladbach have been like the best team. I know most of their goals came against Shakhtar Donetsk, who just could not solve Borussia's team at all. I mean, losing, what was it? I think it was like 10-1 or 10-0 on aggregate between the two games. But this game, Real Madrid thoroughly dominated them defensively. I mean, Mönchengladbach only had 1 shot on target all game, and Real Madrid were doing pretty well offensively as well. I mean, they had 2 goals in this game, both from Karim Benzema early in the first half, which, not surprising me, he's their talisman striker. He's the man that's going to get goals for them, and he did just that. He scored and got them into the knockout rounds, and they lead the group. I mean, there was times that they were third, or I believe even last in this group. It was looking really bleak. I'm sure I've talked about this plenty of times. I live with a Real Madrid fan, and man, he got depressed when it was getting really bad for them. When they lost to Shakhtar Donetsk for, I believe, a second time, when they lost to Mönchengladbach, he couldn't believe it, and he just felt like this was like the era was coming to an end. But Real Madrid saved themselves, get the lead in the group, even if it is just barely. Doesn't matter. They get the lead in the group. They're starting to, play a little bit better, even though in La Liga it's still a work in progress there. But they won 3 of their last 4 games in the Champions League and are looking very good heading into the knockout rounds. Next, we have Atletico Madrid defeating RB Salzburg 2-0. And this was a game where RB Salzburg had a huge opportunity to upset Atletico and make it into the Champions League. I'm not sure when was the last time they made it there, because I do not remember RB Salzburg being in the Champions League knockout rounds for a long time. So that would have been a huge accomplishment for their club. But the quality of Atletico Madrid is just too much. I mean, they got a goal from Hermoso in the first half, and then Yannick Carrasco, him coming back into this team certainly helps them offensively as well after he spent a year in the Chinese league. It's just overall this team was just, a lot better. Even though RB Salzburg certainly had way more shots, they had 18 shots compared to Atletico's 7. However, only 2 of those 18 shots were on target. So it was, Salzburg were certainly getting opportunities. They just weren't being efficient with them. Weren't really making any sort of, weren't making Oblak really work. And Atletico had a lot of their best players. They had Luis Suarez out there, João Felix, Saúl, Llorente, Carrasco, the goal scorer. And they just were the better team. It's just the way it is. And RB Salzburg, despite putting their best efforts out here and really looking like they had a chance. It's just they couldn't get the goals. They couldn't get the shot. They just didn't bring their shooting boots, unfortunately, and had only 2 of their 18 shots on target. And they had more possession. Their passing was a bit better. It just wasn't their night. And Atletico just barely make it into the knockout rounds because, if they would have lost this game, it would have looked extreme. It would have been really, really bad. And after losing that first game to Bayern Munich terribly, they were able to not lose a single game since then. 2 wins, 3 draws, just gets them enough to move on to the knockout rounds. But they need to do a lot better moving forward if they want any chance to win the Champions League. Next, we have Manchester City versus Marseille, and like I expected, there was just no way Marseille were going to be able to put in any sort of effort or they weren't going to get anything good to really get any points against Manchester City. Marseille, the way they've been playing throughout this entire group stage, has been terrible. The worst offense in the entire competition, as they've only scored 2 goals. Olympiacos not much better, but Marseille negative 11 goal differential because and those 2 goals only came in the last game against, I believe it was Olympiacos. And even with Olympiacos losing their last 5 games, they lost all 5 of their last games, including that one to Marseille, they still did just enough to get past Marseille and have, I believe it was because of their away goal, they got ahead in away goals on Marseille, but Marseille needed to get at least a draw here, and it was just not going to happen. Man City are just way too good. Ferran Torres, Sergio Aguero, and even Alvaro Gonzalez got an own goal late in the game, just to kind of sum up the way Marseille were playing in this Champions League. And Man City pretty much went out with their B team. They went with Phil Foden, Zach Steffen started at goalkeeper, Nathan Ake started at the left back position. It's just, Bernardo Silva played. They just didn't have any of their top players. Gabriel Jesus rested. Same thing with Kevin De Bruyne, João Cancelo. It just wasn't a game that Man City were even trying to win, because it didn't matter. Even if they would have lost this game, they still would have had the lead in the group. But even with that, Man City have way too much talent for Marseille to really hang with, and they move on to the knockout rounds, and convincingly at that, even though honestly out of every team they had the easiest group. So if they wouldn't have gone through, it would have been an absolute catastrophe for Man City and that project they got going on there. They move on to the knockout rounds. Next we have Inter Milan versus Shakhtar Donetsk, and I'm telling you, the opportunity to right all the wrongs that had happened early on in this competition were there for Inter Milan. They could have scored the goal, gotten through to the knockout rounds, and had a fresh start. I mean, they had 20 shots to Shakhtar's 7. They had more possession. They had more shots on target, even though it was only 4 of the 20 shots that were on target. Shakhtar only had 3. And they still couldn't get the goal, drew with Shakhtar, and that's the end of Inter Milan's European competition, because they don't even get into the Europa League. This is beyond insane to even think about, because I had Inter Milan, which we'll talk about later, but I'm just going to say now, I had them as my 10th best team to win the Champions League this season, and they don't even qualify for the Europa League. They're making me look bad out here. It's ridiculous. And it's a 0-0 draw when your European competition lives are on the line. It says a lot about the club. And honestly, Conte's job is hanging by a thread. I do not see how he lasts the rest of this season, especially when you look at it. I mean, yeah, they're third in Serie A. So, I mean, at least they're doing good there. They've won 3 in a row. But it's just, my God, you crash out of the Champions League, don't even make it to the Europa League. Kind of makes me feel a little bit like how Lazio did in the Europa League group stage. But it's just after what Inter Milan did last year, how they got all the way to the Europa League final, got second in Serie A, just behind Juventus, and they do this. It's incredible. And they honestly deserve to not be in the Europa League, because they did not play anywhere near their level of quality throughout this entire group stage. And last in the group stage, we have Porto versus Olympiacos. And even with the loss, Olympiacos were able to get through, even though they probably would have liked to get a result here to assure themselves a spot in the Europa League. They didn't really need it, but, still, Porto dominate them 2-0, make it look easy. What was the? I mean, they didn't even have that much possession, but Olympiacos only had 1 shot on target. It was kind of a dud game, but still, Porto got a penalty in the first 10 minutes, scored an extra goal in the 77th minute. Olympiacos getting a red card from Ruben Semedo just kind of adds on to, just the trouble for them. But they are off to the Europa League and are looking good. But just quickly, let's talk about which teams are in Pot 1, which teams are in Pot 2. You got Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Borussia Dortmund, Juventus, and PSG in Pot 1. While in Pot 2, we got Atletico, Borussia Mönchengladbach, Porto, Atalanta, Sevilla, Lazio, Barcelona, and RB Leipzig in Pot 2. Now, I'll tell you what, first thing that comes to my mind, how impressive it is that the Bundesliga have 4 teams still in this competition. I mean, Premier League have Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea. So, they have 3, right? I'm not missing a team. No, they have 3. Sevilla, you got Lazio, Lazio, you have Atalanta, you have Juve, so even they have 3, but Bundesliga have the most teams still left in this competition, and it's very impressive, to say the least, but yeah, we have some pretty interesting matchups that we can see. PSG possibly getting drawn against Barcelona would be incredible, or even Atletico. Even though I wouldn't want to see it, I'm telling you, let me get those teams in the round in the quarterfinals. first round, let's start off easy. Let's get a Porto or let's get Sevilla. Even though I'm not going to be thinking any less of Sevilla after what I saw against from them in the Europa League. St. Lazio. I mean, just don't give me Barcelona or Atletico. I just don't want to see it. Just let's wait until quarterfinals. But yeah, so that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Make sure you guys stick around because when I come back, we're going to be talking about the Premier League dud of a weekend that we just got and see what's going on over there.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, everyone. If you missed the last segment, we talked about the Champions League Wednesday matchups, and then of course I quickly talked about what teams are in Pot 1 and Pot 2 as the draw nears this Monday. And now we're going to be talking about the Manchester Derby dud that we had this past weekend. And of course, some of the Premier League matchups that we also had. We also have a couple going on Sunday. You guys might have already watched them by the time you listen to me, but let's just get into what we saw this weekend, which honestly were a lot of duds. I mean, there wasn't a lot going on, but let's first start off with that Manchester Derby between Manchester United and Manchester City, where we saw these two teams that at the time you're expecting. I mean, man, these are two of the best teams. At least quality-wise, you're expecting these are the two of the best teams in the entire Premier League. So you're expecting a very exciting match, back and forth, both teams giving it their all. But what we got was just disorganization. I mean, no togetherness from either team, in my opinion. I mean, like the first half was a lot of Manchester City. Second half was a lot of Manchester United. I might have gotten that the other way, but man, that's just how bad this game was. It was kind of something. It was easy to forget, and I don't remember the exact number that they had said, but it's like it was somewhere around like the 83rd match that or it's like it ends the 83 match streak of goals being of having goals in a Manchester Derby. Just a goalless draw. It's the worst. Like I've always said, it's the worst result that you can have in soccer. Not something that you would ever want to see. And I mean, it's not like these two teams didn't play like they're their best players. I'm going to go through the lineup for you guys real quick. Manchester United had really the usual starting lineup that Actually, I mean, there were a couple people that weren't there. I mean, Martial wasn't there. Who else? I mean, Edison Cavani, you've been seeing a lot lately, isn't there. But you still got David De Gea, who has been out for a little bit, but he was finally back. You had Luke Shaw, Harry Maguire, Victor Lindelof, and Aaron Wan-Bissaka in the back line. You have Scott McTominay, kind of like as the holding midfielders. And then up top, you have Paul Pogba. For some reason, he was on the left, but throughout the game, Paul Pogba can play in a lot of different areas, but it's just with the whole like issues happening with him and his agent, and him saying he doesn't want to be there, and like it's been going on for a long time, but it's just really ramped up. Him being in the starting lineup, I feel like you always gotta, agree, or like you always want your manager to know what he's doing, but it's just that with them crashing out of the Champions League, the pressure is as high as it's ever been on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And, so he uses Paul Pogba on the left mid. You got Bruno Fernandes in that number 10 spot. You got Mason Greenwood on the right. And, of course, Marcus Rashford, who's been probably their best player so far in the early parts of this season, playing that number 9 position. So, I usually prefer, I believe Martial's injured or he's on the COVID list or something like that. But usually they'd use him up top. You'd have Marcus Rashford on the left. Obviously, Bruno Fernandes always in that 10th spot. And Mason Greenwood on the right. Even though I prefer Edison Cavani, I believe he's much better overall for like the team. They go with this lineup here, and Paul Pogba is still an extremely good player. He's gonna go wherever he goes. He's gonna go to a top club. Either I believe he's linked to like Real Madrid or Juventus. So obviously he still has incredible talent. So it's not like it's bad. But on the Man City side, it's kind of the same thing. They kind of had all of their best players. You had João Cancelo, Ruben Diaz, John Stones, who have been a great center back duo there for them. Kyle Walker to finish up that back line. Of course, Ederson between the sticks. And then you have Rodri and Fernandinho as the holding midfielders. And that front four of Gabriel Jesus in the number 9 spot. You had Riyad Mahrez on the right. Raheem Sterling on the left, and then, of course, the best player on the team, Kevin De Bruyne, in that number 10 spot. So you had all the top players. The amount of quality that I just talked to you guys about, that I just mentioned to you is, any team in the Premier League would look. Maybe not any team, because, there are some teams that are clearly better than these clubs right now. But it's just like, it boggles my mind that this amount of talent can put up the kind of performance that we saw this past weekend. It was terrible. There were some opportunities for Manchester United. They had that one chance in the box where it looked like they got the penalty. It was like a toe tap, really. I believe it was Ruben Diaz who hit Marcus Rashford, but it was just like such a light tap of the toe. I'm sure like in real time, it looked really quick and it probably hurt, but it's like that's such a weak penalty. But luckily, it did not go through because there was an offside. Like Marcus Rashford was just slightly offside before that, so luckily that penalty wasn't rewarded because it was so weak. I feel like it would have been such a terrible way for this game to end, because that would have been the only goal in this game, and it's just deflating because Man City had some opportunities. Manchester United were just able to get ahead of those shots and stop them from really putting up anything. But all in all, both these teams had 2 shots on target. 11 shots, 2 on target for Manchester United. 9 shots, 2 on target for Man City. It was just such a dull freaking game. I don't really know what else to say about it. There was just nothing going on. Manchester City continue to have clean sheets. What is it? They've kept 3 consecutive clean sheets against, or at least Manchester United have kept 3 consecutive clean sheets against Man City in all competition for the first time since 1995. I guess that's one good thing to look at it for Manchester United. But the thing is, Man City have failed to score in 2 consecutive away games for the first time since 2017. So it's just like both these teams seem like a shell of themselves. It's like even with them, they still have a game in hand, but they're 8th and 9th in the Premier League. This game certainly looked like they were playing like a mid-table team. There's no reason for me to feel like the way they played in these games, they should be any higher than they are right now. It's just look at some of the teams ahead of them. Everton, for sure, the way they were playing early on in this season, they have that early lead, and they've kind of faltered a little bit. They got 2 losses and a draw in their last 3 games, so they've obviously dropped some points there. But you look Southampton. I mean, they've been playing extremely well. 3 wins and a draw and a loss in their last 5 games, playing really well. And then West Ham, 4 wins in their last 5 games. It's just incredible what they've been doing. And then, of course, Leicester City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham. You're talking about some of the better teams in the Premier League. It's just, but there's just no reason that I feel like Manchester United or Man City should be in the top 5. Like, really, like, it's really bad. It's really, really bad. And Manchester United only had, like, the goal differential. It's not like they're dominating their competition. 19 goals for 17 allowed for Manchester United for a +2 goal differential. And for Man City, it's not much better. They've only scored 17 goals. That offense, that attack that you are always talking about, like that they're one of the better teams in terms of attack in the entire world. That is brought up so many times about Manchester City, but the way they're playing so far, it's just, they're tied with Crystal Palace, Leeds United in terms of goals scored. And they played the same amount of games. Well, no, Leeds United has played 1 more game, but they played the same amount of games as Crystal Palace. They played 1 more game than Aston Villa, and Aston Villa have scored 4 more goals. And the same thing for Manchester United. I mean, but the thing is, their defense is also playing extremely poor. But you look, like, you usually see Manchester City, like, amongst the top scoring teams in the world and obviously in the Premier League. And they are, they're clearly, they're less than 7 to 8. They're tied for 9th. They're tied for 10th. They're tied for the 10th best offensive team in the entire Premier League. It's just an incredibly poor start to the season for Manchester City and obviously Manchester United as well. And even though Manchester United have been on a torrid start, before this draw, winning 4 straight games, or what was it? Was it 4 or was it 5 in the Premier League? Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. It was 4 because they lost to Arsenal, which, I mean, that's another thing where it's just like, how? Because Arsenal are just so bad right now. It's really sad to watch what Arsenal. Like, I was so high on Arsenal early on in the season, especially with them getting Thomas Partey, but then it's just been a horrid show for them this year. And getting Aubameyang, you're thinking, oh, that's what they need. They need, like, this type of season I was expecting from them if they hadn't re-signed Aubameyang, if he had left and they would have been trying to put something together, but not them getting all the transfer targets that I was expecting them to get, like Partey and Aubameyang, and they even brought in Willian, and even with all that, they're still playing so bad. I know I'm getting off topic. It's just it's just really, really crazy that they're only 7 points away from relegation. But either way, I mean, what we saw between Manchester United and Manchester City, it's just, I hope we don't get that at all anymore against some of the top clubs, because this was the match of the week. They're like, it hands down, because you look at some of the other games, I mean, Aston Villa, Wolves, West Ham, Leeds United, Newcastle, West Brom, I mean, there's really nothing. I mean, well, Everton versus Chelsea, but even that one, it was a 1-0 victory for Everton, and that one goal was a penalty because of one of the only mistakes Edouard Mendy has made so far in his Chelsea debut season. And other than that, there was really nothing else that either team did. There was one chance that it looked like Everton were going to get another penalty, but was it Calvert-Lewin where it was called offside? But like, I mean, really, this Manchester derby was the game of the weekend, and for good reason. Whenever you think Manchester United versus Manchester City, you're expecting fireworks. You're expecting, even like physicality. The first yellow card wasn't given until like 60 minutes into the game. That makes me feel like there was just no intensity in this game either. I like, this game literally had nothing. Because even if, okay, fine, you're going to give me a goalless draw, fine. Like if you tell me before I watch this game, oh, this is going to be a goalless draw, I mean, like, my God, okay, at least give me a fight here and there. I mean, these are two rivals. Like, at least give me some elbows here and there. Give me a yellow card. Maybe, I mean, obviously you never want to see a red card. You don't want to see a player get hurt or anything like that. But still, just give me some physicality, something where I can just be excited with what I'm watching. But I'll tell you what, for both Manchester fans, like Manchester United fans and Manchester City fans, this must have been just like bleeding of the eyes. Just like there was nothing good going either way. Even though Man City certainly had a few chances where it looked like they were going to get a goal, but Man United were able to, get a block and a nice defensive save here and there. It was still just such a boring game to watch because there was just nothing to look forward to. Absolutely nothing. So with that, I mean, they just, they're playing the way they, like the way that they are, like an 8th and 9th place team. So terrible game from them. However, the Aston Villa and Wolves game had a little bit more to it. Aston Villa going through, getting the win 1-0 over the Wolves, who, I mean, haven't same thing for the Wolves. They've been playing extremely inconsistent this season. I was expecting them to be, battling for a European competition spot, but they're 12th place. They've lost 3 of their last 5 games, including a draw in there, dropping so many points. Their defense has been terrible, but what's been more like glaring has been how inconsistent their offense has been. I understand they're missing their talisman striker Raul, but it's just like they have so much more talent than just Raul. I mean, Adama Traore had such a great season last year. Neto's good. João Moutinho. What is it? Who else? Who else is on their team? I mean, man, let me tell you, Nelson Semedo. I mean, bro, the mistake he made late in this game to give Aston Villa and a 10-man Aston Villa side at that, a chance at a penalty to take the lead. Honestly, it just makes me feel like he's in the right spot. I mean, he might even drop lower because, I mean, after that kind of mistake, and it's not like he's been playing that good this season. I mean, he can get dropped off the starting 11 of the Wolves. I mean, unless they don't have anybody behind them that that can really be an option. But it's just, I remember saying it when Alphonso Davies just made him look like an absolute like youth academy product in that Champions League game. I said it. He ended his career with Barcelona there. Now, I forgot who it was. Who was it? McGinn. Probably just ended Semedo's run as a starting player for Wolves in this game. Because he made him look so silly getting by him. And then he once the ball gets by you like that, you're in the box. Don't try to like make up for it. You're not going to get the ball. You're just going to get a penalty. And you can see it by the look of Semedo's face after that penalty. He was like, what did I just do? Like, what is going on to my career? I was in Barcelona, it was about a year ago. A year ago, I was in Barcelona. I was a starting right back for Barcelona. What has happened to my career? I mean, I'll tell you what, it just kind of feels like he's not a smart player, because that is not a smart play, and he's just not good. I mean, but I mean, the Wolves in general are not good, and even with Douglas Luiz getting a red card in the 85th minute, you're thinking, okay, look, Wolves got an opportunity here to at least maybe take the lead, or at least just get a draw, get points, move on, because Aston Villa aren't a bad team this year. They're playing extremely well. They play good together, especially in attack, with McGinn, Grealish. They got good players up top. I mean, even Ollie Watkins has been playing good. Traore, Douglas Luiz, they have good players up top. So they can score with some of the best of them. And like I said, this season, like literally what I just said when I was talking about Manchester City, Aston Villa has scored 21 goals in 10 games. They can score. And the Wolves literally dropped the ball in this game, and having a chance to move ahead of Aston Villa, they didn't do it. They lost this game and allowed Aston Villa to have a point ahead of them with 2 games on hand. It's it's really dumbfounded for what the Wolves have done this season. But, I mean, you got to give it to Aston Villa. I mean, for as long as I can remember being a soccer fan and just, kind of looking in, I'd never really focused on any one team. But, at least with Aston Villa, I always considered them to be one of the lower teams in the Premier League, kind of trying to fight for relegation, which, maybe they were for a long time. But now that I'm kind of focusing more on the Premier League, you kind of see, they're like, I can understand why they're one of the more like popular teams. They fight really hard. They have, and especially now, they have a solid star in Grealish. They're getting good talent around him, and McGinn, Ollie Watkins, Douglas Luiz. They're getting good team. They're getting good players. And I'll tell you what, Martinez, the goalkeeper, man, what a game from him. I mean, he saved some shots that seemed sure to go in for the Wolves. But he saved the day for Aston Villa in this one. And then for the Everton-Chelsea game, I mean, this game was kind of felt the same as Manchester United versus Manchester City, except in this one there was a sure penalty. I mean, I don't know what Eduard Mendy was doing there. I mean, it was a glaring mistake. Even though it was just his first mistake, it looked really bad. Like, why was he going so far up? And it just looked really bad. But Calvert-Lewin did good enough to just get a touch on it, get in the way and drawing a penalty. And it looked like he drew a second penalty like I, recently talked about, but he was offsides just by a bit and didn't get that second penalty. But he has been their best player this season. I mean, Everton have, gotten some great additions, and Alain Decore, of course, James Rodriguez, but the development of Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been the trademark for Everton this season. He's, obviously their best offensive player. I mean, Richarlison just coming back from that 3-game suspension is obviously going to help as well. Iwobi, what he was able to do this game as well, just shows, the versatility that this team has to be able to play so many different players. But overall, this just was also just a very pedestrian game. I mean, Chelsea kind of didn't do much in this game. I mean, they didn't have Christian Pulisic, and even with guys like Kai Havertz, Timo Werner, Olivier Giroud, who's been playing so well so far, Mason Mount even, and I'll tell you what, man, Mason Mount almost had the goal of the weekend. I don't care what's going to happen tomorrow or whatever, today, whatever time you're listening to this. I don't care what's going to happen the rest of this weekend. If Mason Mount would have made that free kick with Pickford, kind of thinking he was going to go over the wall, but then he goes opposite end and almost just hits the bar, that would have been the goal of the weekend easily, because it was such a nice kick, taken free kick. It just didn't go his way. But overall, I mean, this Premier League weekend, I hope we get some better games upcoming. We got Southampton going up against the worst team clearly in this season, Sheffield United. See if they can keep up what they've been doing so far this season. You got Fulham, Liverpool, Tottenham, Crystal Palace, Arsenal, Burnley. Can Arsenal somehow do, get a win? Can they do something? But, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. And Leicester City, Brighton, I mean, I was so on, the high horse of Brighton this season, and they have just not done it this year. I was clearly wrong on them. I mean, they're only 4 points off relegation. But, I mean, it's just a lot of relegated teams against teams up top. I mean, that Crystal Palace game versus Tottenham can be kind of exciting, but we'll just have to wait and see. I hope they're way more exciting than what we saw on Saturday. So, that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Make sure you guys stick around, because when I come back, I'm going to be talking about the Europa League group stage and talking about which teams are the favorite to win as we're now heading into the knockout rounds.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, everyone. If you missed the last segment, we talked about the Premier League dud of a weekend that we had. Just so many boring games going on, but still, I talked about them because, of course, always covering the Premier League here, and, of course, went over that Manchester derby that we had that, I mean, can you really call it a Manchester derby, guys? But still, we talked about it. And now we're going to be getting into the Europa League group stage recap. Just talking about some of the final games that went on, what the implications were in the groups, and of course, just talking about the favorites to win. Talking about some of those teams coming in from the Champions League, and which teams are in Pot 1 and Pot 2 as we get into that round of 32 knockout rounds. So let's just get going with what went on during match day 6. Now, I'll quickly go over it, but I mean, we got Leverkusen taking care of business versus Slavia Praha to take, the lead in that group. This game here at the end was going to decide which team was going to be the top in the group. Leverkusen, I always felt like they were going to take care of business here. They're one of the better offensive teams in this entire competition left, and they did just that. CSKA Sofia got like a little bit of pride win here, just to get the 3 points and defeat Roma, who I mean, when I really look at it, they did play some of their good players, but I mean, for the most part, they rested most of their guys because obviously they got to think about Serie A and what they're going to be doing there. So they rested most of their top players. You didn't see Chris Smalling got subbed in. Pau Lopez didn't really play, and for the most part, I mean, yeah, they pretty much subbed most of their play. They kept most of their players on the bench, and CSKA Moscow took care of business. They got their 3 points, and at least got a little bit of a what is it like? Yeah, just they got some pride there. So they get that win. Standard Liège and Benfica tie, get a 2-2 draw here. And Benfica end up losing that top spot of the group to the Rangers, who took care of business versus Lech Poznan as they defeated them 2-0. Arsenal complete their just domination of the Europa League so far as they defeat Dundalk 4-2. I mean, it's not like they had a tough group. I mean, they had Molde, Rapid Wien, and Dundalk, all teams that they are obviously much better than. They scored 20 goals in all in their 6 games. I mean, they have to do good somewhere, right? I mean, this is the rest of their season after the way they've been playing in the Premier League. We talked about in the last segment. This is their whole season here. They have so much riding on this end, like this to end in a good way. And I mean, obviously, they took care of business in the group stage, but the things could change in the knockout rounds. I mean, they do not play well when the pressure is on. Pressure has never been on during this entire group stage. I mean, Molde, yeah, they played well, but they lost 2 in a row. I mean, obviously, they lost to Arsenal. And after those losses, there was just no threat for Arsenal to lose the lead in the group. So, yeah, they take care of business here. Dundalk don't win a single game, have negative 11 goal differential, while Arsenal cruise to a knockout round, appearance. Next, we got PSV taking care of business versus the worst team in the group. They win 4-0 and get that lead in the group over Granada, who drew against PAOK in the final game. Honestly, a little bit, because I'm always, if you guys listen to me, I'm always a little bit of I root for Granada a bit, because I'm always enjoying the underdog and the teams that don't pay much for their players, because they don't have a big budget, but still somehow find a way to do well, and Granada have done just that. But PSV get up on top. 4-0 win over AC Omonia, getting 2 goals in extra time from Joel Pirot. And yeah, they just cruise. They're off to the knockout rounds. Next, we have Rijeka defeating AZ Alkmaar. And man, what a way to go out, man. AZ Alkmaar, the way they were playing all group stage long made me feel like they were going to be the team that knocks out one of Real Sociedad or Napoli, and they just couldn't hold on. 2 losses and 2 draws in their last 4 games just was not enough to give them the points that they needed to move on to the knockout rounds, as Real Sociedad get a draw and are just 1 point ahead of AZ Alkmaar. I feel bad for them, honestly, because they played really well. Their defense was solid. Their offense was a little inconsistent, but still was there. But they needed to take care of business against the worst team in this group, a team that has clearly been underneath the other 3 throughout all the group stage, and they get their only win against AZ Alkmaar. It doesn't help that AZ Alkmaar got a red card late in this game for Jesper Karlsson in the 80th minute. Rijeka get an extra time goal to get the win and just crush the hearts of AZ Alkmaar fans everywhere. It's one of those results that you just never want to see, but it just happened to them, man, and it sucks. That's definitely one of the worst things that can happen there. But next we had Rapid Wien and Molde tying 2-2. It was a pretty fun game to watch. Molde scored early. Rapid Wien scored equalized just before the half. Molde scored right after halftime, and then Rapid Wien equalized once again just before the game ended in the 90th minute to get the point. Not that it really did anything in terms of where they placed, because Molde were clearly going into the knockout rounds, but we're still just 3 points ahead of Rapid Wien. So still gotta give your hats off to Rapid Wien for trying so hard and at least trying to make it a competition. And they did play a lot better than Molde in this game, but so they were rewarded with those efforts with a point, but still no longer in the Europa League competition. Next we have Nice versus Beersheva, and Nice they were never really in this competition. They were never really in this entire group stage in the Europa League, and just they didn't show up for Liga at all. 3 points in 6 matches. They lost 4 in a row to end the competition, and it was just really bad. Really, really, really bad. And they lost to the other team that was like at the bottom of the group in Beersheva, and it kind of sucks for Beersheva because they started the group stage great, winning their first game. Then they lost 4 straight after that, including 2 to Slavia Praha, 2 to Leverkusen. But then they were able to beat Nice and, at least get 3rd place. It was a consolation prize, I guess you can say. But yeah, so these 2 teams were battling for which was the worst in this group. And Beersheva come out on top. Granada, 0-0 draw against PAOK. Don't really do much there. They had slightly, it was pretty much even possession, even passing accuracy. PAOK was certainly a lot more aggressive. Granada had a few more shots, only 2 on target though. So it was kind of a boring game to watch. Not what you want to see from Granada as they head into the knockout rounds. And with this draw, they're now in pot 2. So they could get a bad draw and be out of this competition early. You have a 1-1 draw from Napoli and Real Sociedad. Real Sociedad get a late equalizer in extra time from William Jose. Not sure if that draw helped them get into the knockout rounds, because I'm not really sure. Let me check what the head-to-head battle between AZ Alkmaar and them were. It was a 0-0 draw and a 1-0. So regardless, Real Sociedad were going to make it through, even if they were tied in points, because they did defeat AZ Alkmaar 1-0 in terms of aggregate between the two games. So really, there was nothing in it for them to tie it, especially with AZ Alkmaar losing. But of course, if AZ Alkmaar, but it was late in that game that AZ Alkmaar were able to get the AZ Alkmaar loss. So there was still a lot riding for Real Sociedad in this game. So they got a draw to assure themselves a spot into the knockout rounds, which you want to see. You want to see the best competition there, and Napoli and Real Sociedad are certainly that. Next, we have Young Boys and CFR Cluj, which, you had some late goals in this one. There was no goal until the 84th minute when Cluj took the lead in the 84th minute. And then 2 extra time goals from the Young Boys give them a 2-1 lead over CFR Cluj. Not that it would have really mattered. Both teams were locked into the place that they were at. But still, it's kind of like it's a good sign for the Young Boys to see that kind of fight in them as they now head into the knockout rounds, because they're certainly going to need it going in there. Next, we have, what's the next game? We have Milan versus Sparta Prague. And Milan take care of business. Jens Peter Haas, their new signing, gets a goal, and, they get the 1-0 win. And this was kind of important because, they needed they got the lead in the group, and they're going to be in pot 1 now, so they certainly will get a much favorable draw. Lille, on the other hand, losing to Celtic in the last game of this group stage. Their only loss in this competition, not the way they wanted to end it, but that is how things go for them. And now after being one of the best teams in this group, pretty much the entire group stage, they are in pot 2 after losing to Celtic, and they lost to Celtic 3-2. It was not the way they wanted to go. Timothy Weah got a goal for Lille in this game in the 71st minute to give them the tie 2-2. But then David Turnbull gets a 75th minute game winner for Celtic to give them the 3-2 win, and at least give them some sort of consolation prize as they played terribly in this group stage. I was expecting them to be, a contending third place team in this Europa League group stage, but they were clearly outclassed by Milan, Lille, and also Sparta Prague, as they were behind them by 2 points. And they had clearly the worst goal differential, -9 in this entire group stage. Just not what I expected at all from Celtic, but still, what a terrible way for Lille to end this group stage run. After playing so well early on, they get this loss, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is their first loss of the entire season. Let me go to Ligue 1 real quick to see have they lost a game? No, Lille lost a game recently to who was it? They lost to Brest. All right, so yeah, Lille are certainly not. After that nice start to the season, they've kind of cooled down a little bit, but still they're into the knockout rounds. That's what the main goal was early on, and they did accomplish that goal. But it still has to sting just a little bit that they are not able to have that lead and be in pot 1. Next, you have Hoffenheim and Gent, and Hoffenheim just continue to look like one of the best offensive teams in this entire competition. Just completely dominating Gent, who, all competition long, they haven't looked like, they've been in any sort of, comfortable here. No momentum for them. They scored only 4 goals, allowed 15 for a -11 goal differential. Even losing to Liberec, it didn't really work out for them. 0 points in 6 matches. And Hoffenheim go out on top of this group, not losing a single game, getting 5 wins in 6 games. Next, we have Ludogorets losing to Lask 3-1. And in this game, Lask pretty much took care of business in the second half. Ludogorets took a early lead in the second half with a 46-minute goal, but then 3 goals in the matter of 11 minutes for last gets them the win here. Not that it really matters, because even with the win and the Antwerp loss, they still finished third. Even though it's a close third, I mean, all 3 teams in this that scored, that got points, ended with double-digit points. So it was certainly, at the at the expense of Ludogorets, as they got 6 losses, 19 goals scored against them. So they certainly did not play well at all. But Tottenham and Antwerp are the teams that go through, because Tottenham were able to win against Antwerp 2-0 in that battle for the top 2 teams to see which team can get the top spot in the group. And no surprise, I mean, Carlos Vinicius, Giovanni Lo Celso, 2 of the youngins on that team, getting goals for them. They did not start Song. They did not start Harry Kane, because obviously those guys need to rest since they've been doing so much for them in the Premier League. But they're still able to take care of business. I mean, you had a Gareth Bale signing. You saw Lucas, Sergio Reguilon, Harry Winks, Doherty. They had a lot of great players on that team, and even Joe Hart got a start there, here and there. I mean, but so Tottenham get that 2-0 victory, get that lead in the group, and are in pot 1 and looking very good, looking like a favorite in this competition. So, really good from Tottenham. Next, we have Maccabi Tel Aviv defeating Sivasspor 1-0. It wouldn't really have mattered even if, let me see, they had 8 points. Well, yeah, I guess it would really have mattered if Sivasspor had a big time chance to win against Maccabi Tel Aviv and move on to the next round, but they lost 2 games in a row, and really not what you wanted to see from them towards the end of this game. But still, that's what happened, and it sucks for them. But still, Maccabi Tel Aviv were the better team throughout the group stage, and they move on. You got Leicester City defeating AK Athens 2-0 for them to take the lead in the group. And just by a hair, because Braga and them are tied for 13 points, but Leicester City defeated them in terms of aggregate scores. They beat them 4-0 in the in match day 3, tying with them in 3-3 in the match day 4. So they had some exciting games going there. But yes, Leicester City get the lead in the group. They're in pot 1. Braga defeating Zorya Luhansk 2-0. And you also got Dynamo Zagreb defeating CSKA Moscow 3-1. Pretty much taking care of business there and getting the lead in this group after kind of faltering a little bit early on, getting 2 draws to start this group, but then ending it with 4 straight wins. Dominant ending for Dynamo Zagreb, and Wolfsburg defeating Feyenoord to, either way they were going to have the lead in the group, but or at least get into the knockout rounds. But still, good way for them to end this competition. 2 straight wins, and they are now into the group, into the knockout rounds. So now that we talked about the games, let's go into the knockout rounds, just see which teams are in each pot and which ones are the favorites. We got Ajax, Club Brugge, Manchester United, Shakhtar Donetsk falling into pot 1 from Champions League. And for pot 2, we had RB Salzburg, Krasnodar, Olympiacos, and what was the other team that from Olympiacos? Oh, and Krasnodar from going into pot 2 from the Champions League. Now, when I go and look at this competition, obviously you got to look at pot 1 to see which teams are possibly going to be favorites to win the whole thing. And it's hard not to go with Tottenham. I mean, the way they've been playing in the Premier League, obviously, Harry Kane and Song are going to be used going into the knockout rounds because, this is a big time part. Obviously, with them being in the lead in the Premier League, that's going to take, priority there. But they're obviously going to have to find a way to play these guys in the knockout rounds because they're their best chance at winning. They have so much talent, and they certainly can win the whole thing. You also got to look at Manchester United. Even though they crashed out of the Champions League, they started it off extremely well, have a lot of talent, and I'm sure with the way they've been playing. They have a lot of motivation after losing last year's in the Europa League, I believe, in the semi-final. They're certainly going to be motivated to try to rewrite, this season and end it with a Europa League win. Also got to look at AC Milan. They've been playing extremely well in Serie A. Look extremely well in the group stage, even though they lost to Lille. They were able to get it back and get that group lead, and are in pot 1. And if they can get a favorable draw, pretty much anything can happen here. But I still see those teams possibly taking the lead, and a team that I think can surprise some people, I would say, is Hoffenheim. The way they've been able to score, and it's not like they've been letting up a lot of goals. It's not like they're in a really tough group. What was it? It was one of the groups in the bottom, yeah. Saverne, Zvezda, Liberec, Gent. But they only allowed 2 goals, scored 17 for a plus 15 goal differential. That's one of the best goal differentials in the entire competition. It's actually, is it the best? It's tied for the best with Arsenal. Obviously, both those teams did not play well. Both those teams did not play against really tough competition. But still, I feel like Hoffenheim can surprise some people and make it far in this competition. Not sure if they win it, but don't be surprised if you see them make a surprise run in this Europa League. Arsenal, I don't really see much going on there. Ajax could certainly surprise some people there. Same thing with Leicester City if they're able to get some of those guys that have been injured for a while back, and Napoli, who have been playing well in the Serie A, but we'll just have to wait and see. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Make sure you guys stick around, because when I come back, we're going to be talking about the top 10 teams remaining in the Champions League.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, everyone. If you missed the last segment, we talked about the Europa League, obviously all the games that went down in the match day 6, and then I just quickly talked about which teams are in each pot, which teams came down from the Champions League, and which are the favorites to, win the whole thing. I also mentioned a little, sleeper that I think might surprise some people, so if you guys want to check that out, make sure to check out that segment. But now, we're going to be talking about the top 10 remaining teams in the Champions League. And first, I want to talk about what teams I talked about in the before the group stage even started, about which ones I felt were going to win the whole Champions League. So let's see how bad or how right I was. So first, I had Inter Milan. And obviously, I talked about this in the first segment, how wrong I was here. I thought they were even going to lead the group over Real Madrid. Even though I didn't have them as the best over Real Madrid in terms of I thought they were going to win. I felt like just the way they were playing last season, and I just thought they were going to make it through. Obviously, I was so wrong. Next, I had Borussia Dortmund. They started off a little slow, but they eventually did well and, led their group. So, they took care of business there. And then next, after that, I had Barcelona and Juventus, who I just didn't have a lot of faith in, even though they have 2 of the best players of all time on their team. I just didn't have a lot of faith that they were going to be able to actually win the whole thing. Atletico Madrid was next, and I was very high on Atletico Madrid because I felt like their defense was obviously always going to be there, but their offense was going to be even better this season. Kind of didn't show me enough in the group stage, but I still feel like they're one of the better teams in this competition. Next, I had PSG, and even though starting off I was very, very down on them, now I kind of feel like they are still back to being one of the favorites. And then I had Real Madrid and Manchester City next, two teams that, Manchester City got a favorable draw, didn't really have any, teams pushing back at them, so they haven't really had a challenge. Obviously, it's going to change in the knockout rounds. Can they finally get over the hump? Not really sure about that, but I still had them as one of the favorites. And Real Madrid, one of the better defenses last year, they got lucky to lead their group at the end after failing so hard early on, but still had them as one of my favorites. And then the top two I had is Bayern Munich and Liverpool, who, they're still two of my favorites to win this whole thing. So let's get into who I believe is going to be in the top 10 remaining teams in the Champions League. At number 10, I have Chelsea. Now, Chelsea were able to lead their group. Not that they had a very tough group at that. They took on Krasnodar, Rennes, Sevilla, after winning the Europa League last year, did play extremely well in the group. They won 4 of their last 5 games of the competition and certainly gave Chelsea a run for their money. But I love the combination that Chelsea have. I don't think they can win it all. I do think they have a chance, a slim chance, but after getting in pot 1, maybe they get a favorable matchup, get some momentum going into the quarterfinals. But it's just like the combination of attack that they have with Edouard Mendy between the sticks. They have, and Thiago Silva starting to get into a rhythm in the back line. I feel like they have a good combination of defense and obviously that great attack. It's all going to ride on Christian Pulisic. Can he stay healthy and be the number 10 that, they need him to be? If he can, Chelsea can certainly be a team that surprises people. And while I think it's far-fetched to think that they'll win the whole thing, they can certainly get into the quarterfinals and possibly the semifinal, depending on what matchups they get. Number 9, I have Borussia Dortmund. Same place I had them in my first top 10 for the Champions League. I have them in number 9, and though they did win the group over Lazio, Club Brugge. I kind of felt like they started off kind of inconsistent. Of course, eventually they start, they won 4 of their last 5 games and, but they're still kind of looking kind of soft in the Bundesliga. They're dropping points there, and I just don't know where I'm at with Borussia Dortmund. They could just still be too young. The back line is kind of weak. Even though I like Akanji, obviously Mats Hummels is one of the better center backs of his time. It's just, I really don't know. I feel like they're still too young. Even with Haaland, Jadon Sancho, I don't feel like they have enough to win consistently in the knockout round. So I have them at number 9. They certainly have an abundance of talent. That's why they're there. But I just don't have a lot of faith that they'll be able to get over that hump. Next at number 8, we have Barcelona, and they've been a mess in La Liga. That ending to Juventus certainly did not look good at all. Didn't give me any kind of confidence to put them any higher on this list. And they're at number 8. The cohesion just is not there. I don't feel like Lionel Messi really wants to be there. Obviously he said that he didn't want to be when the season started, but it's just, this Barcelona team just does not have it. And with them being in pot 2, it doesn't really look like there's going to be, a good matchup for them. They're going to take on a tough competition, and they're going to kind of have to, figure out their woes as it goes on. Luckily for them, they won't have that second leg of the round of 16 until March, so they have a lot of time to kind of figure out what's going on. But still, it doesn't really bode well for Barcelona, as they're just not playing well in La Liga. Lionel Messi is not having that same sort of impact that you've seen from him season in, season out. So it doesn't look good for them right now. Number 7, we have another La Liga giant in Real Madrid. Now, after what I saw from them in the group stage, there is just absolutely no way I can endorse them as a top 4 team like I did before the group stage started. The defense just is not the same. I don't feel as confident with Sergio Ramos, Varane, Casemiro. I just don't know what it is. I know that they need to save Modric a little bit, not play him every game because he's getting up there in age. Same thing with Kroos, but they need those guys to set the tempo in the midfield. I know Benzema is their star talisman striker, and he's certainly what creates most of their offense, but they rely on so much youth to create things for them, like Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo. It doesn't feel like it's a sustained... It's a possibility for sustained success for them, especially in the knockout round. So I have them at number 7. They're still obviously one of the better teams in this competition. I just don't have them. And technically, with them being at number 7, I have them in the top half of this competition. So whatever, especially since they're in pot 1, any draw they have. I mean, if they get, I don't know why I'm blanking on this, but I don't not remember if they can still get someone from their same domestic league. I don't think they can, so they can't get Atletico Madrid or Barcelona. So that's really lucky for them. They have a very easy draw there. Then they either get Mönchengladbach, Porto, Atalanta, or they can't even get Sevilla, so Lazio or RB Leipzig. I mean, obviously, probably the worst matchup for them there would be, in my opinion, Atalanta. I feel like they just have so much attacking prowess, and it'll be really tough for Real Madrid to keep up with that. But still, Real Madrid, one of the better teams in this competition, they come in at number 7. At number 6, we have Juventus. Now, I feel like Juventus is relying on a lot more youth than I've ever seen before. Guys like Chiesa, Kulusevski, Weston McKennie. They got a lot of youth on this team. Obviously, they still have some veteran presences there. I mean, obviously, Ronaldo, you got Cuadrado, you got Morata, he's still kind of he's not super old, but he's you kind of consider him a vet already. Aaron Ramsey, they got their fair share of veterans. I mean, maybe if they bring in Pogba in the January transfer window, who knows? Maybe things change there. I mean, and obviously things will change if some of these teams make moves in the January transfer window. I never even mentioned that before I talked about this top 10 list. Maybe if there's some big time moves, I'll make another list. Who knows? But right now, I have Juventus at number 6 because I just don't feel like, even though with Ronaldo in the lineup, they're certainly a much different team. I just feel like they're dealing with a lot of people that don't have experience in the Champions League at all. I mean, Weston McKennie played for Schalke for most of his professional club career. They never really did anything there, so he doesn't know anything about Champions League. Chiesa doesn't know anything about Champions League. Kulusevski, same thing. Still great talents, but it's just once it gets to that higher level of competition, I feel like they're not going to be as efficient, and I think that's going to hurt Juventus in the long run. So I have them at number 6, just outside the top 5. Now at number 5, I have Atletico Madrid. Yes, I have them higher than what I had them in the beginning, in that first top 10. Main reason for that is because I just feel like they have better cohesion as a team. I feel like Diego Simeone as a manager is certainly, going to help them get over the hump in some situations, put them in the right spots. Not to say that for Real Madrid, like Zinedine Zidane isn't a good manager, but it's just like I just feel like for Atletico, Diego Simeone thrives in those knockout round situations, and I feel like with the kind of attack that they have, I feel like Atletico Madrid, I've said I feel like so many times in this segment. But anyway, for Atletico Madrid, they have such a great combination of attack and defense. In my opinion, the best in this competition. It's close with teams like Liverpool and Bayern Munich, but they just have, it's just, can they put it all together in these knockout rounds? Can they find sustained success offensively with guys like Luis Suarez, João Felix, who, are playing extremely well, but when it matters most, can they do it? If they can, I have no reason to think that Atletico Madrid can't make it to a final. I really can't. They're that good. And, you obviously got one of the best, if not the best, goalkeeper in the entire world in Jan Oblak. That certainly helps, makes it, and gives you a leg up in most competitions. And I don't know. I just feel like Atletico Madrid certainly deserve to be a top 5 team. Next at number 4, we have Manchester City. Now, I really don't know why I'm putting them this high. I just can't see any of the other teams being considered favorites over them. I mean, like Atletico Madrid, I feel like if they get Manchester City, it would be a tough game, even though I still think Atletico could beat. Oh my God. My apologies, guys. I'm so tired. But even though Atletico Madrid, I could still see them defeating Manchester City, I just don't see them being favorites over them. I mean, Manchester City, the amount of money they got, I mean, it's just so much talent on that team. It's just that they've failed to really make an impact in this competition ever. Since Pep Guardiola's gotten there, I think they made it to a semifinal once, but since then it's been a lot of quarterfinal exits. They even had a round 16 exit, and it's just like last year against Lyon was embarrassing. So even if they get a favorable matchup, you can't really guarantee that they're making it through. It's just there's so much unknown with Manchester City. All that is known is they have so much quality. Like up and down the roster, it's just hard to really count them out in any given game. But at the same time, you can't guarantee that they're going to win. So that's why they don't go any higher. They're at number 4. They're one of the better teams in the world. Obviously, the Premier League, it's not looking that good for them. So obviously, I feel like they'll just be even more motivated to make things right in the Champions League and because for them, if they are able to win the Champions League, honestly, it won't really matter if they don't win the Premier League, which, I mean, they're far away from even thinking about that. I mean, they got to try to get a Champions League spot, but I mean, that's the way I'm really thinking about it. If Manchester City are able to win the Champions League, they won't be thinking about, we lost in the Premier League. They'll be perfectly fine. They want that Champions League win, and I feel like they can do it. At number 3, I have PSG. Yes, I have them 2 spots higher. Now I have them as a top 3 team in the Champions League. And some of you might be saying I'm very biased. Yes, I'm a PSG fan, but it's just hard to ignore the talent of Neymar, Mbappe. Yes, a lot of the times it's very individualistic, but I feel like the team is playing more together as of late. The addition of Rafinha, Moise Kean, Danilo Pereira certainly is making an impact on the squad and making things better. Last year, they didn't have Marco Verratti for most of the competition. He's back. He's healthy. I know they don't have Icardi either, and that's someone that I thought was going to play a huge part in their success this season. That has not been the case. However, he will be back for the knockout rounds. I mean, I'm hoping he's healthy. Maybe he can be used as a sub. Maybe the thing is, they have a good replacement. That's why getting Moise Kean was so important. Because if something like this specifically was happening, which it is, they can bring him in. And he has not missed a beat for them. He has been in probably the best scoring run of his young career so far. He loves it in PSG. He's, as you can tell by the way he speaks. And now Neymar and Mbappe seem to be more committed to PSG, at least with the way the reports are looking as of late. So that's only going to help the team even more. I feel like having, someone like a captain like Marquinhos is great. Obviously, Kimpembe and him, manning that back line. The fact that they've been together for so long, it's one of the, the longest tenured back lines, honestly. And I know Thiago Silva was there for a while, but Kimpembe has been a regular part of that back line for a very long time. And he's one of the better center backs in the world, honestly. So the only problem with this team has been the wing backs, or I guess fullbacks. But I really like Florenzi on the right back. I think that really solves a problem for us there. And then on the left back, they're using Kurzawa there, or they're using Dagba. They're using some different players. So it really hasn't been anything solved on the left back position. But apparently, they're looking at trying to get Dele Alli from Tottenham, who hasn't been used at all there. And I would be very excited for that. So I have PSG at number 3. A lot of talent, a lot of really good players. Obviously, Keylor Navas between the sticks. And they are a top 3 team in the Champions League. At number 2, they have Bayern. I have Bayern Munich. I still have them behind Liverpool. I even though they dominated their group, I don't feel like they're playing that consistent in the Bundesliga, even though they are leading. They are in first place. I just don't feel like they're, being as dominant as they were last season. And, when you see that sort of weakness, I just feel like a team like Liverpool, who obviously is number one, will, seek that out, seek those weaknesses out. And it's clearly in the back line. And I just feel like, with guys like Pavard, Theo Hernandez, even Kimmich, I don't feel like those fullbacks are good defensively enough to help out that back line of guys like Sewell or Javi Martinez or Boateng. I feel like that back line, aside from Sewell, is getting pretty old. And I feel like it's going to hurt them in this competition. Of course, I still have them as the second best team, so absolutely they can win the whole thing once again. But still, they're going to have to rely heavily on that offense of, Lewandowski, Müller, Serge Gnabry, Leroy Sané, Goretzka. They're going to have to rely heavily on those guys, and especially now that they don't have that regular holding midfielder of Thiago to really settle things. And honestly, that could probably be the difference between Liverpool and Bayern Munich being 1 and 2. So that's why Liverpool now are at number 1. I mean, obviously they're one of the better teams. They're one of the best teams in the entire world. And even after dealing with so many injuries early on, they're still right there with Tottenham for the lead in the Premier League. It just goes to show, the overall depth of this team as well. And the fact that they're without Virgil van Dijk for so long, and they've been without who else was it that they were out with? They didn't have Sadio Mane for a little bit, I can't seem to remember. It's just that they've been dealing with so many injuries all season, but I still consider Liverpool the best team in the entire competition. Any game that they're in, of course, they're going to need to get, and Ali Song hasn't been in, but he's back in training. That's going to be a huge game changer for them. But overall, I just feel like Liverpool are the team to beat in this competition. It should be a no-brainer there, especially if they can get healthy for the knockout rounds. But the fact that they're in pot 1, they have some leeway. They can draw some other team, even though there's no, they can draw with any team. So they can also get a team like Barcelona, Atletico Madrid. It can get tough for them. But if they can get a favorable draw, save them a little bit of time before they, to be able to get Van Dijk and get some of those other players to, kind of round out the team, that would be beneficial for them and can certainly give them a huge boost in winning the Champions League once again. So that's going to wrap it up for today's segment. I hope you guys enjoyed, everything I offered you guys today and, just all the talk we had. I always enjoy it. So as always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you and have a great night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.